Hey everybody, it's Brad.
And I'm Christa.
With the Big Family Homestead, and oh my gosh, holy mackerel, we have the treat of treats.
Mm-hmm.
We have the one, the only, the ever awesome, smiling and happy and giddy, the Patriot Nurse. Yay!
Yes.
How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so grateful to be here with y'all.
I gotta be honest. We've been watching you for 10 years. I don't get celebrity struck just because I've been in the music industry my whole life. But I got to be honest, I'm just a little bit going, I've been listening to her and watching, and we've learned a lot. Little bit of butterflies, just a little bit.
Are you kidding? I was totally, when I took the class with her, I was totally fangirling there.
Fangirling.
And I never do that, ever. Okay?
That's true.
It was awesome.
So thank you so much in advance for taking time to talk to our people and us.
Yes.
And we're very grateful.
Thank y'all so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
All right. Well, we got to dig in because the time is short. And if people know what I'm talking about, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So for those few, the one or two people that are watching that may not know who you are, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm Patriot Nurse, and I've been creating content online for the greater part of a decade now. My background is, of course, in nursing, and I also have a decent amount of experience traveling internationally for short-term medical missions. So long time ago, nigh on a decade now, I was looking myself to be more prepared for unintended, unexpected situations. And I was searching the internet for videos created by healthcare professionals that were targeted towards equipping people for that reality, that eventuality from a medical perspective. And I found none. And as it was with Jeremiah, I said, basically, all right, Lord, here I am. If you want me to do this, I'll do this. Because several people had asked me to address certain issues. And I thought, well, why not use this newfangled thing called YouTube and create a video and help everybody at the same time and avoid repeating myself? So I started making the videos to encourage people in making their own medical kits and steps that they could take to be more medically prepared for natural disasters, for shifts in political realities, and also for breakdown in rule of law, as we have known throughout history is liable to happen with major transition points in history, such as we find ourselves in currently. And so from that point forward, it became a calling, and it's become something that I've dedicated the greater part of a decade of my life to. And that leads us here today. And I'm so happy to be able to reach out and to interact with people in such a miraculous way now. It is that we have people who, for instance, are living further and further apart, or perhaps we're living closer together from a population density standpoint. But I've come to find out that people are so incredibly lonely and so incredibly apart nowadays because of the political realities, because many people who hold to biblical principles or who hold to traditional values in a world that increasingly views these as disposable, they find themselves more and more trying to find their own tribe. And that's really what we do. That's what we do as content creators who are real and authentic people reaching out into a world that is grasping and hoping for authenticity.
So how long have you been in medicine?
Gracious. Well, let's see here. Since the early 2000s, I've been involved in medicine, whether it was, going through nursing school, but I suppose you could say it was a calling from early on. I remember in fifth grade, it's kind of a funny anecdote. In fifth grade, we had our trip to Washington, D.C. in my grammar school. And on this trip on the bus, I recall that several people ended up getting sick with whatever it was. And I believe it was some type of digestive woe, including the teachers and the chaperones, by the way. So I remember going around on the bus and triaging the plastic bags that we have and attending to people. And that was my fifth grade class field trip to Washington, D.C. So you could say, of course, that it was the swamp of D.C. that infected people instead of a virus. I don't know.
That's awesome.
But, from an early age, that's where really I got my
the
start.
bugs in little Ziploc baggies, labeling them, taking them home. Sounds like Egon from Ghostbusters.
Oh my goodness.
So I gotta, what made you want to get into that? Like, I remember when I was becoming a musician, there was like this spark and something sets off. Well, what was it for you that made you say, you know what, I want to be a nurse?
I remember actually my mother telling me very early on that wherever you go in this world, people are always going to need care. because they're either going to be sick, having babies, or in the process of transitioning out of this world, all of which require support for their health in one way, shape, or form. And so it's actually my mother's advice. She said, if you go into medicine, she actually told me, if you go into nursing in college, your credits will transfer and you can always shift over if you change your mind. That actually was not true. So sorry, Mom. It was not true. But I got started in it because I viewed it as a way to always have options and to never be boxed in. And I think in many ways, that's what we seek, is as people who are historically literate, preparedness focused, we seek a level of control over our circumstances to be a blessing in the midst of unknown times. And so that philosophy guided me from an early age, and that's what I've eventually come to live out in my life, and I hope to continue to grow in it.
Wow.
You know, that's awesome. And Krista's got a question, but before you do, you've so very clearly defined the reason why I say we're into preparedness too. Is not necessarily to draw another day's worth of breath, but so that we can be help and light and encouragement to point all things to God while we're going through this trouble. It's not just to draw another breath and then be done, because we're all going to be worm food soon anyway. It's how do you live the breaths that you've been given the most effectively?
Right.
So
what changes have you seen in the last 10 years in the medical system?
In the medical system. Wow.
We got 4 hours for
That's
that
a
one.
loaded question. Sorry.
Oh, that's a great one. That's a great one. So let's count back. We're at 2023 right now. So 2013, gracious sakes alive. So 2013, I can recall, actually, let me even go back further. When I was a teenager, my now late aunt, God rest her, she was a cardiac nurse. And she came to visit my family, and we were talking, and I was a teenager at the time. And she asked me, well, what do you want to do when you graduate high school? What do you want to do? And I said, I think I want to be a nurse. And she goes, oh, honey, don't do it. I'm like, that's not exactly what you would expect as far as a supportive, go get it, go grab the world by the horn. Nope. No, honey, don't do it. And so ultimately I did not take her advice, but she told me, she said, it is changing so much since I got in, and it's not changing for the better. There are many factors associated with it, but I think the implementation of Obamacare and the massive intervention and control grab from the federal government cannot be underestimated in its impact and in its singular level of importance. Because, first off, major 10th Amendment issues notwithstanding, when the federal government, and indeed any third-party intermediary, gets involved into the private sector, there's going to be a shift in value and price discovery for the net negative. Whenever there is the interdiction and the interference of a third party into a free market, the true value and the true cost gets warped. With Obamacare, we saw the Affordable Care Act. We saw the classic maxim really effectively take place over the past 10 years. Whatever it is, I believe this is a Thomas Sowell thing, whatever it is, the name of a federal government or indeed a large government program is, the net effect will be the antithesis of its name. So the Affordable Care Act had the net impact. It had the net impact of making things not only unaffordable, but also the antithesis of care, of neglect. So it became Expensive Neglect Act. When I think about it that way, that catapulted, and I would say accelerated, the change in the medical industrial complex. I think that was inevitably due, but it increased its rate and the rapidity of the change to a factor that I think we really cannot overestimate. So what I've seen as a nurse over the past 10 years, certainly, is an increasing level of governmental involvement, a decreasing availability of care, a decreasing quality of care, and an increase in the cost of care. So every negative nexus that one would have expected, and indeed what they called them the prognosticators of doom, who were saying, oh, this is going to be terrible. No, it has been. The only reason why it hasn't been so apocalyptic and catastrophic in our appreciation of it and its results is that it has been so linear and steady over the past 10 years, the proverbial frog being boiled in the pot. So it really is that bad. It truly is that bad. COVID put this to a whole nother level because of the mandates and some of the experimental intervention requirements that healthcare providers had, which I've made several videos about. That fundamentally and structurally changed the nature of the labor pool, which comprised the workers, whether it's doctors or nurses or really anyone in the medical industrial complex. That shift was made possible with the Affordable Health Care Act, and it was rapidly implemented with the changes that COVID brought.
Well,
Wow, we have actually experienced that with our daughter Grace. Just long story.
she was born at 1 pound and 15 ounces, NICU for several months.
Yeah, just loads of different things that happened
yeah.
with her. And, 2008 was then the beginnings of the Affordable Care Act.
All of a sudden, her surgeries that she was promised vanished overnight.
Right. They pushed it off. And now she's 19 years old, has yet to have one of those surgeries.
We can't get her back in the system. They don't want to deal with her because a number of reasons.
Right. But so we've experienced that firsthand, and that's...
I see parallels in the medical industry with what happened with the military industrial complex right around World War II, where everything just kind of got blended together with the government and private sectors. And now all of a sudden, exactly like you were describing. But now here's a question that I have. What about records keeping and data tracking and all of these things? Because everybody gets that little piece of paper when you go to the hospital or the doctor that says that we're gonna gather your data now. We're gonna put it in this big database, and it'll be safe, and we won't do anything with it. But then you see companies like Apple who sold out, and you see companies like Facebook and YouTube who were doing backroom dealings, and Twitter. What do they do with that data? Is it truly internal? I don't want to get you in trouble, but
there are multiple facets here of security. First, you have and I'm not an IT expert by any means, but I do know people who are. And as part of the security evaluation, we have to look at, number one, the physical security of the data, two, the internal security of that data, and then three, the potential for that data and for that healthcare information to be catapulted outside without the consent of the people from whom it was gathered. So the first is the physical integrity and the security of the database. The database itself in any hospital or in any institution is constantly under attack, constantly. And this is not something that is particularly well known, but it is indeed true. And if you do just a brief web search, you can find this to be so, that foreign national actors are some of the chief antagonists in attempts to penetrate our grid from a healthcare record standpoint, and then to take them and sell them on the dark web. Because, for instance, a person's identity is valuable on par of, I believe it's single digit cents, 7 to 10 cents, if I'm not mistaken, in value on the dark web for a person's information, name, date of birth, social security, etc. However, their healthcare information, their healthcare data, that healthcare identity is worth on the order, if I'm not mistaken, between 30 to 35 cents a piece. Wow. So this doesn't seem like very much, but if you have an individual or a foreign actor that's attempting to penetrate the database and the grid security of a major hospital, a major regional hospital, which has on order of 1 million to 3 million records in it, that became a tidy sum very quickly. And then, right. So that's part one, the ability of people who are weaponizing that healthcare and leveraging that healthcare information for the purposes of extortion. That's part one. Part two, the integrity of that information within the grid. It is possible for any healthcare worker who has login credentials to view healthcare records that are not only germane to the patients that they're treating, but also it is possible in many cases to access previous patients and patients who just with a simple search, you can pull them up. There are internal lockouts and firewalls to limit this to a certain degree based on where you're at. But the way that this translates is that you particularly have a nosy neighbor who knows that you happen to go to the hospital and they're able to find out everything, including, for instance, previous diagnoses for non-related diseases, i.e. STDs or other acquired infections that people would rather not be made known public and can be used for extortionary purposes. Then, of course, you've got the security on a whole nother level, which is what is happening to this collation of data and how is this data being used and filtered through artificial intelligence to find patterns in people for the purposes of making, for instance, insurance more profitable, or for making large trends on the choices of a particular populace and whether or not it's considered by that group of people, whether or not certain interventions or mandates are considered palatable to them, shall we say. So it's used for various different purposes. I would say that it has, any system, of course, has the inherent weaknesses and flaws of the programmer, of the designer, and of the individuals who are charged with keeping it. So whatever weakness or potential political proclivities that they have, it will be manifest in their system as well.
Well, now the amount of eyeballs on that data, is that gaining or reducing in amount of people that have access to see personal data?
Gaining, I would say, because when you had, for instance, the good old days of paper charting, which I missed sorely as a nurse, I loved it. The good old days of paper charting, it was, I have a physical hard copy of that patient's medical history, their physical workup, what our care plans are for them and their current experience in the hospital or wherever. And I could flip that through right here. The ability of that person's data to be leaked or to be touched by eyes was limited to who had physical custody of it at the time. The second that everything got shifted into the cloud, we lost control over that. So whereas you only had perhaps 1 to 30 potential healthcare providers or adjunct support personnel in a hospital stay that would take custody of your data. Now, if a hospital has 5 to 10,000 employees, you have 5 to 10,000 potential sets of eyes that can look on that person's data or can sell that data, can exploit that data, can make, here's another example, can make a snap decision to click on a link that was sent to their work email that then goes and infects the entire database backwards and then collects things. This is a serious issue for any major hospital and institution. So the number of eyes on our data is just growing and growing and growing. And that is one potential reason why many people are electing to decrease their exposure into the medical industrial complex, is not the least of which privacy concerns in the midst of everything else.
Wow. That's so much information.
So, well, here's what
So much.
here's where I wanted to go before we go to the next. I've got a list, by the way. I thrive with lists.
He totally thrives.
I thrive
with
under lists.
Yes.
Are we already in socialized medicine, or is there another step?
We are. It is not as bad as other places, but we are definitely there. And when I say socialized, let's define our terms. So socialized would be that you have a level of control and you have a level of floodgate availability that is being limited by a centralized power. We do have that right now. There's no question about that. The issue is, do we have an out, and are there other places that people can go to receive care electively that they can pay for and have an unmediated free market in the experience of medicine? We still have the availability for that here in the United States. In the case of boutique medicine, there are also people who elect to leave the United States to go to Mexico, Thailand. The Philippines is a very, very popular place. Costa Rica is another popular place for people to go and receive treatments, for instance, for dental work or for elective surgeries or supportive surgeries that would be unachievable and inhibited from a cost standpoint here in the United States, but are well within reach of other places. And so we still have an out if you're willing to travel or if you're willing to pay more. You can still get care in the United States that's not mediated, for instance, like the National Health Service in the UK. You still can have access to it, but it will cost you, and probably cost you through the nose. If you want access to healthcare at a much more affordable price without having an intermediary, probably going to end up having to leave the United States very, very soon to get it. And I know people who had to make that choice. I know people personally who had such severe and limiting disabilities that the cost of their own health care in the United States and also their supportive staffing, this individual had to have like regular nursing visits, et cetera, to the home. It was bankrupting them. And so this individual made the choice to leave the United States and to go to what we would consider a developing country, because they were getting a better quality of healthcare. They were getting more support staff for the price, and they were not having the intermediaries of somebody from some alphabet soup organization telling them you can't do that. So there is an option for people, but increasingly, I think we're going to have to widen our lens of where to get it.
Well, and that's an issue that we're having. Where we live, we have limited specialists.
And reducing.
And reducing specialists. Like there is one oral surgeon in our state that works with pediatrics.
Just one.
There is limited doctors that deal with rheumatoid arthritis in Wisconsin. I mean,
unless you live near Madison.
Unless,
but then
of course, you live near Madison, but you're still waiting 6 months to a year to get an appointment.
Yeah.
You know, and for those of us who can't just leave the country, where do we go from there?
Looking to the future.
We're looking to the future. Where do you see people getting real care in the future?
What I anticipate happening is a few different options. The first is of what we just spoke, which is people leaving the United States or choosing to travel for specific interventions or for completely relocating for lifestyle reasons. The second is that many people are seeing that you just can't trust the non-maleficence of healthcare providers the way that you used to. And I'm sorry to say this, but this is the truth. Over the past 3 years, with the mandates that have been foisted on healthcare workers from corporate and from, in many cases, state and federal institutions, the free-minded, liberty-loving, independent thinking healthcare providers left. Not all of them, but a good many of them. And in doing so, it created a nexus of parameters that have set us up to require us to be more self-sufficient in healthcare. If I know that if I'm going into a grid or I'm going to the ER and I'm going to be waiting 18 to 20 hours for subpar care and an attitude and political weaponization of the healthcare providers when I eventually see them, what is my incentive to go into that grid in absence of potentially needing life-saving treatment? Mm-hmm. There is none. And so many people are saying, look, I know that the longest lived people in my life, I've heard this so many times. The longest lived people that I know never saw a doctor once, or they saw a doctor 3 times in 50 years. The attitude of if it ain't broke, don't fix it works. But in the medical industrial complex, it has shifted to if it ain't broke, we'll fix it till it is. Oh, we'll keep on fixing it till it gets broke.
Till it is broken. Yep.
Yes. So that was the Southernism. So when we look, y'all, yes. So when we get to this reality coming up over the past 13 years, we're now, what is it that Orwell said? We have now sunk to a depth, which is the first duty of every intelligent man to state the obvious. And what is the obvious? The obvious is that the ways of the past, the time-tested methods that our ancestors used, they got us to this point. Obviously, our ancestors survived using old ways like herbs, traditional ways like herbs, traditional treatments. They survived long enough to pass on their genes to get us here. When you look at the net effect of more quote unquote healthcare, it has not extended the life expectancy of the past 30 years generation. We are seeing a decrease in not only quality of life, but a decrease in longevity for individuals. This is with more access to healthcare. This, of course, refutes directly Obama's perspective and that the Democrat Party would like us to believe about, okay, more access to healthcare. We need more people to be healthy. Well, we got more access to healthcare by every rubric which you guys set forward, and it has yielded less satisfaction with patient outcomes, a lower standard of living, and a lower life expectancy. So by every rubric, objectively, y'all's party and y'all's position failed in this. Mm-hmm. So where I see this going is people are saying, all right, we're going to return to the ancient path on this one, as in the book of Jeremiah. stand in the ancient path and ask for the way there, and then you will find rest for your souls.
Amen.
So people are standing in this path and they're just like, where is this? Where do I go from here? And where is my faith and trust? Is my faith and trust in a bunch of people whose quote unquote science seems to change based on the political expediencies of the time? Or is the ancient path, the creator who made me and put me in this world also gave me parameters with which to thrive? I believe him and I take him at his word that when he says, I want you to be fruitful and multiply, and I put this here for you to thrive, that he means it when he says it.
Yeah. Testify.
Amen. All right. So here's the question that you have so perfectly segued to.
Oh, totally set it up.
Christa attended one of your classes just recently, and first of all, thank you. The
Thank you for
amount
doing these.
of knowledge that she came home with was astounding. And we've already put it into practice. So I've had several splinters, and she was Johnny on the spot. No, I mean, I'm teasing. No, but here's the thing, and for the viewers out there, she did not ask for us to do this.
No.
We're doing this. I'm saying this because I want you to take seriously where we're going as a society. You're going to have to look at the past and go, okay, that was the past. Now, where are we right now? Where are we going to be?
Right.
And so I would seriously encourage you to look into the Patriot Nurse's classes. She's got several different kinds of classes. Medicinals. We're going to be having another one, hopefully, fingers crossed, eyes crossed, knees crossed, legs crossed.
Yeah.
But please do talk about your classes, because we have already benefited greatly as a family. And man, I hope there's a lot of the stuff that she's learned that we don't ever have to deal with, but thank God we now know.
Right.
So please tell me about, all the folks, what is it that you're doing with these in-person classes?
Thanks so much. Yes. And I really appreciate that phrase. That means a lot to me. And not only just from a encouraging standpoint of my heart, but it helps me. It gives me strength to know that other people who are getting equipped, that their families' lives are being positively impacted and that there's less suffering in the world because of it. That's been my overall goal, not only with the classes, but also with the channel, is I want people to have longer, happier lives with the people in their family and in their own sphere of influence whom they love and want to shelter and whom God has given us shepherdship over, guardianship over. So the classes themselves, they have evolved over the years. When I first started out, my goal was simply, and I did a 1-hour class at first, which was, I started realizing that is way too much information to give people in 1 hour. So then it was stretched to 1 day, and then 2, and then 4. And now I have 6 days total of curriculum that I teach. In these classes, the 4-day block, the medical prep class that I teach, which is what Christa came and took, this class is designed to equip people where there is no doctor, where healthcare becomes either impractical or inadvisable to attain for whatever reason, for security issues, for concerns in political turmoil, whatever the case may be. My goal has been to equip people so that they can function with increased competency in absence of orthodox white coat methods. And so for the first 2 days of class with Medical Prep 101 and 201, we speak about the main areas historically of death, disease, mortality, and morbidity worldwide. The best predictor of the future is the past. And so when you consider the main causes of suffering worldwide, they are today and have been for eternity past: respiratory diseases, digestive diseases, and wounds. Complications of wounds were associated therewith. And so by focusing our learning into a protocol and into a framework, my goal is to equip people instead of being overwhelmed with a bunch of minutia, or here's this is how you set a shoulder, or this is how you do that. I want people to think. And that's the first thing you might remember this, Christa. I told y'all in class, like, I want to teach you how to think.
Yep.
If I teach you and equip you how to think, it doesn't matter what supplies you have. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you can understand how to make sense of the information in front of you, and how to coalesce and distill down that information into actionable objectives, regardless of what supplies you have stored up or what access you may or may not have, you have options. actionable options in the midst of uncertain times, which kind of goes back to why I became a nurse in the first place. Having options and the ability to exert control over our circumstances for a positive outcome in the midst of uncertainty, that's what made me want to become a nurse in the first place. And so with the curriculum that I teach, my goal is to help impart that to people and equip them to take that framework into whatever unknown situations they encounter, and then have a positive impact on their circumstances for life and for good coming out of it. So the third and fourth day is nutrition. The entire third day is nutrition, survival nutrition. And the fourth day is herbs and old school disease. Mm-hmm. So we've dovetailed the second half of the curriculum into that framework that we function with in the first half. And really it's layer upon layer as we're teaching people, we're equipping people how to think, how to problem solve, and how to have actionable options and to source their supplies based on what they have available.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So now, okay, I actually do want to come back to the classes, but because I know people are probably scrambling for a pen and paper, and they're gonna. I actually want you to lay out where they can find out more about this in a minute, so that we'll give people a chance to go get whatever they need to write down. However, we did bring up the fact that we were going to have the Patriot Nurse on our channel, and we said, hey, is there any questions that you might want to ask her? Mm-hmm. And we had a few that were really standout questions.
Yeah, there was a couple that really stood out. There was one, the Jace medical, the Jace case. What do you think?
Are you familiar?
Are you familiar with the Jace case?
I have been swamped over the past 2 weeks, so you're going to have to bring me up a little bit to speed.
What it is it's a emergency medical kit of antibiotics.
But you go through a doctor.
Yes.
That you can online. Sorry.
Yeah, it is. You submit a form online, and then you have in your area, in your state or local area, a doctor that is licensed in that area will contact you via email, phone, whatever, and then find out, okay, is this the best fit for you? And then they will prescribe this antibiotic kit. It has, I think, 5 different antibiotics in it that are one dose, I guess you would say. So like Cipro something. I can't remember the last part of it. Like it's a Cipro. Whole dose of. Yeah. Thank you. It's, a 10-day supply of that particular.
But they had
medicine.
Different ones.
Yeah, they had different ones. But I'd never heard of it until somebody asked about this. So I'm Googling.
We're asking you.
So we're asking you, what do you think about it? Is this something should
we'll parse without endorsing specific brands. Let's go to the crux of the issue, which is, I believe, is it a good idea to have and use antibiotics? And I think that is, wow, that's a TED talk. That's like an hour-long TED talk.
We know your stuff.
Yeah.
So essentially, we need to ask a few questions here. With any healthcare intervention, including with antibiotics, is there a cost-benefit analysis and a risk to harm trade-off that we have to balance? 100% yes. Yeah. The data that we're seeing and the emerging real science with a capital S that we're seeing is that the repeated dosage and even intermediate usage of antibiotics, meaning not routinely, but every now and then, this can have very serious consequences long-term for people's health. Not the least of which is intestinal floral disruption. And we're finding out now that even one dose of antibiotics can fundamentally alter the zoo population in your intestines, which serves as the backbone of one's immune system. And so for that reason, I think we have to be very judicious and cautious. And we're seeing more and more that these antibiotics are having many unintended consequences, including early onset. It has been correlated with early onset type 2 diabetes, not only in children, but also with adults, because so much of the body's ability to use sugars and to balance insulin is governed by this intestinal makeup. So I think it is, from a preparedness standpoint, is it wise and judicious? The question could be raised. Is it wise and judicious to have a store of antibiotics available and at hand? I would say yes, it is. The question is, should we be using these as a frontline treatment option or a frontline interventive option, I would submit to the answer is no. So I would much rather, and my own thinking on this has evolved over the past 10 years. Was it Sir Winston Churchill said, those who never change their minds never change anything. Yes. So over the past 10 years, my own perspective on this has changed as that data has come out and as we've seen more and more the effects of this. So for me personally, I would say, is it wise to have a store? Yes, it is. As long as it's a quality source from a reputable production source, then that's fine. But I would use this more as a fallback, less interventive treatment. We want to go from low to high as far as how hard we hit things. Yeah. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yes, it totally answered that question.
Yeah. And in an unexpected way, which is great.
Yes.
Because in all honesty, I think most people would go, I have to get these. I got to hurry up and get these. Because we live too much in fear of what if instead of what's right in front of me. What do we got to deal with right now? Right. And so I appreciate that candor, because I was expecting you to go, yeah, you should. Oh, yeah. Well, the answer is good to have them on hand,
right? But not
the first
resort,
line,
right? Well, and I think the main issue that we need to address first is what's causing this issue in your body. Why are you getting an ear infection? Why are you having cellulitis, which I've had 3 times? I have not thankfully had it anymore, but why are we having these issues? What's the main root here? And how do we move into fixing that main root?
Sounds like somebody went to the Patriot Nurses class.
I think somebody did. I don't know who that was, but
well, we've learned a lot.
I have learned so much, and it has just, going to your class has just opened up my mind to, we need to think,
and we need to get more knowledge.
Get more knowledge and apply this knowledge.
So another question that came up that I think this one's a good one. A medical emergency all-in-one kit, is that the way to go to have on hand at home? Or is there one you endorse, or is there not one you endorse? Or what is your ideology?
Or
how's
your methodology on what you should have at home for medical supplies?
If I would have endorsed one, I really should, like for the sake of everyone, the public wants it. I should make it for them. I really need to do one that I actually endorse and set it up. I know.
Well,
and all my other projects.
The logo on the side. Yeah.
I know. I have friends who've been asking me to do that for years. My outlook on things is quite a bit different. And I think it comes from my own personal experience. We're all victims of our own experience in one way, shape, or form. When I was doing some short-term medical work in Cambodia, as a matter of fact, I was working in an environment bereft of the gear and supplies that we have been told to paralytically and pathologically need in this medical world that many healthcare providers have been raised in. I think what the root issue and the root question is, can it be asked, will purchasing a kit with all of the gadgets and all of the gear translate into life-saving capability when I need it? The answer is no. The issue is when we purchase a kit, that is supplies. Supplies and gear are inanimate, unthinking objects that cannot wield any force of their own except that which the provider uses them to accomplish. A kit is limited by your own knowledge as the provider. Better to invest that money, those resources, your time, into developing your problem-solving capability, because we have seen history is an obvious testimony to this. People can have stores and stores of supplies. You may not be home when there is a situation that may arise which demands your care. You may not have access to your kit. God forbid, it could be stolen or damaged in some type of natural disaster. And then what? All of that money, time, and resources that a person has invested is gone and is fruitless and useless. Whereas if he's invested that time, energy, and money into developing himself and his own problem-solving capabilities, if he knows where he needs to steer the vehicle, he can get to where he needs to go using whatever route is available to him or supplies that are available to him at that time. So that's my focus, is instead of telling people to purchase gear, which I obviously would be the financial beneficiary of, would I ever make one? Instead of telling people purchase gear, go out and do this, I'm telling people this is not a purchase it, check it off talisman approach.
Right.
A kit is not going to impart to you safety. Your own diligence to develop your skill set, I would submit, undergirded by your faith in God, is what ultimately is going to shield your family from this. So the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and they are saved. When we think about it, one of the archangels, his name is Raphael, which literally means like the healer, Rapha. We have the modern Hebrew term of Rapha, which is doctor. Healing comes from the Lord. We are merely his servants as those who seek to support and save life. Rather than investing one's time, energy, and money in stuff, I would encourage people to invest it in skills.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had a feeling.
Mm-hmm. I figured she would go that way. Yeah.
Well, and that's a perfect segue right in back into the classes.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I want to talk about the classes, and then I've got one final question.
Okay.
So the classes, for those who've been waiting with bated breath, going, please tell me how I can find out more and enrich myself, my family, all the people around me with knowledge. How do they find you?
They can find me at thepatriotnurse.com. Shocker, thepatriotnurse.com. Now, there's actually a couple of options that they have as far as opportunities to trade with me, because I understand that not everybody can take off time to leave and come and train in person. There is a shorter class that I have available called Foundations of Medical Preparedness, and that's a 4-hour online class. All of this can be found at the website, thepatriotnurse.com. Should they elect to train with me in a 4-hour online setting or an in-person in-class setting, both of those options are available there, and the full schedule is at the website. I would say the benefit of coming and training in person is that you get to meet fantastic, like-minded people like Christa, who are there.
Get to meet you. I mean, what's better than that?
How do people say ho? Sorry.
I enjoy interacting with people because so much of I've always been a teacher. Long before I even realized the capability to mesh together health with teaching, I've always been wired that way. Ever since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I love being able to work with people and to impart that and to help equip people and see that light bulb come on. That is a portion of the experience that I get a lot of fulfillment of as an educator and an instructor in class. But also, one of the other things that blesses my soul is when I break people up for groups, like when we did group work, you remember in class, Christa, and you see that dynamic of people coming together in a group setting, sharing the little bits of, oh, she said this, oh, you remember this, hey, it says this in the book on page 2. When you have this nexus coming together of experience and vantage point, you get not only a better seating of that information into a person's psyche, multiple layers of development of these principles and precepts, but also you get camaraderie. And going back to what we were saying, the first part of our time together today, people are living so densely populated, but further apart emotionally and not connected and disparate and lonely.
Right.
When you come to class, I cannot tell you how many times I've been doing this for over 10 years now. And I hear people say, I had felt alone before class. And now I realize there are so many people, not just like me, but who are nearby me. And the friendships that get made and the relationships and the connections that get forged in class, that's part of the benefit that you really just don't get in many places anymore. And I'm happy to be able to provide and facilitate that for people. Thepatriotnurse.com.
That's awesome.
So I have a question, but do you have any more?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, first of all, in advance, thank you.
Thank you.
Here's the question. So when all of this is done and we're all worm food and it's over and we're finally there and we get to see our Father in heaven, what would you want him to say to you?
Good job, darling.
Praise God.
Yeah.
When you think about it, in Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes, the wisest man who ever lived is Solomon. The wisest man who ever lived, the most wealthy and powerful man who ever lived throughout human history and existence. He's giving his counsel over to people at the end of all things and what he's learned in this life. Last chapter of Ecclesiastes says, dear reader, one can read many books. There's no end to them. It's exhausting. But at the end of life, it's this: fear God and keep his commandments. This is the entire point of being human.
Mm.
And so when we reflect upon our lives, I have striven to, in my own life, says David Hamelech says in Psalms, he says, Lord, let me know the end and the number of my days. We are creatures who are here for a limited amount of time. We are the links in the chain to eternity past and eternity forward. And we have a task that our Father has given us to come into this world and to transform the darkness into light.
Amen.
And in doing so, we bring glory to him. But also we have, in a dynamic as yet unknown fully, we have the ability to partner with our Creator in a process that fulfills us and actualizes our own destiny. And so that has been my own prayer throughout my own life. When it's 2 a.m. in the morning and you're woke up and wrestling with your conscience and your eternity. When you're in the shower, it's always in the shower when you have your great moments with God.
Oh, yeah,
When you're in the shower and you're like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? Over and over again, I believe it comes back to what Solomon said: fear God and keep his commandments. Clarity will come. Clarity comes through movement. Destiny comes through the everyday. When we fulfill our everyday purpose and we live a life in accordance with his word and actualize our destiny and keep his commandments and fear him, everything's going to work out. It's the everyday, the day-to-day tasks, the moments of obedience and submission to him with a joyfulness that impacts our surroundings. I think that that's what life is about. And hopefully I will get his approval that I've done well with the task and have created a positive impact with the talents that he has gifted me.
Wow.
Praise God.
That's awesome.
Well,
Thank you so much.
oh, nurse who
for
is
joining us
patriotic,
today.
we
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
I'm so grateful to y'all.
We didn't even get into any of that.
No,
That's a whole nother can of
Yeah, no
worms.
kidding.
The
No kidding.
Patriot side, there's a whole
Oh.
interesting story there.
Oh, man.
I feel like there's a lot of history in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
And how?
well, for next time.
Yeah.
So, Patriot Nurse, thank you very, very
Thank
much.
you so much.
And
Thank you.
that said, I got to grab my mouse so that we can click the thing and yeah.
Stop recording.
Anyway, you guys go to thepatriotnurse.com,
Mhm.
check out the classes.
Watch all of her videos.
Yes. And I don't know. Leave a comment and thumbs up.
Yes.
Subscribe, because it really does help.
Yes, it does.
If anything, it guides the algorithm to at least not shadow ban and dox things.
Right.
Because it happens. I know. We know.
Mhm.
Anyway, you guys all have an amazing and blessed day. Thank you so much.
Mwah.